The wedding reached the part where the rings were to be exchanged. When my wife Emma suddenly said she wanted to pause for a moment. She then turned and knelt in front of her first love. Ethan, you once promised me that no matter when I chose you, you would be with me. So, if there is a next life, will you marry me? Ethan choked up and nodded, tears streaming down his face as he hugged my wife, then turned to me and said, Ray, although I'll never have the chance to be with Emma in this life, I hope you can take good care of her for me. Whispers filled my ears from the guests surrounding us. Across from me was the bride, crying as she embraced someone else. Everyone was waiting to see the joke of me, the groom. Yet, I smiled and walked towards Ethan, placing the groom's boutonniere in his hand. How could there be no chance? Since Emma can't let go of you, I'll make this happen for you now. Over the past 8 years, I worked hard and selflessly, hoping to provide Emma with a happy life. But in the end, it was due to her unexpected pregnancy that we ended up with this rushed wedding. I thought that once we were married and had a child, Emma would eventually settle down. But now, I watched the woman who was supposed to walk through life with me, tightly embracing someone else. Even if I clenched my fist hard enough to make a sound, my heart still ached like it was being cut by a knife. Suddenly, I didn't want to endure it any longer. Because of my words, Ethan suddenly turned pale and lost all his strength. Without hesitation, she called security and rushed Ethan to the hospital, even scolding me for being heartless and petty as she left. Clearly, it was something that could be resolved in a minute, yet I had to make everyone feel so awkward. Neither my in-laws nor my parents could stop Emma. So I took on all the remaining anger. The host looked at me awkwardly with the microphone in hand. My mom thought I was embarrassing her, crying and hitting me, telling me to bring Emma back. Dad scoffed and told me to be careful, firmly pulling her away. My mother-in-law already looked down on me, and at that moment, she coldly criticized me for being a useless, poor kid. She blamed me, saying that if I wanted to marry into their family, I had to learn to endure grievances and not embarrass my wife in public. For the first time in 8 years, I felt that sincere feelings might not be reciprocated. I didn't want to be the son-in-law of this family anymore. They took the remaining guests and left, leaving me to walk back alone and reflect. I stood alone at the door, watching everyone leave. Behind me was the silent, empty hotel. In front of me was the sudden downpour of heavy rain. After my in-laws and the others left, my parents drove up and stopped in front of me. Mom rolled down the window, and seeing them, all my grievances erupted in an instant, and I hoarsely called out Dad. Just as I was about to open the car door, I heard the sound of it locking from inside. I stared at them in astonishment. Mom, in her disappointment, advised me, right now, you should listen to your in-laws, reflect well, and think of a way to win Emma back. After all, she is carrying your child, that Ethan cannot surpass you. Mom, how can you say that? Mom ignored me, rolled up the window, and drove away. I watched the taillights of the car fade into the distance. The wedding venue is a resort hotel built by the seaside. I couldn't even get a signal to call a taxi. A kind security guard handed me an umbrella, his gaze full of sympathy. After I expressed my thanks, I struggled to walk towards the seaside, holding the umbrella with one hand. I was soaked to the skin, feeling a cold that pierced to the bone. My heels were sore from the rubbing. When my phone finally got a signal, dozens of messages popped up at once. All of them were from Emma. Each word questioned me, even though I had already explained that I only saw Ethan as a brother. Why was I still targeting him? I ignored her, and the next moment, a video from an unknown number came in. In the video, Emma was holding Ethan's hand while accompanying him for an examination, occasionally stroking his forehead, with red eyes pleading for him not to be in trouble. I recalled that I had fainted at work due to overtime before. That time, I had a head injury and my stomach hurt badly. But she only coldly reprimanded me, saying she wasn't a doctor. What use was it to call her? I stayed in the hospital for a full half-month, and she never showed up once. Later, I found out that Ethan had a cold the day I fell, and the doctor told her it could lead to pneumonia, which worried her greatly. So Emma vented all her anger and concern on me. I stopped in my tracks and gave a self-deprecating smile. I realized too late, and that's what led me to this embarrassing situation. I'm in a taxi, and then Emma's call came through. After a furious outburst, she gasped for breath and said that Ethan was so scared by me that his stomach problems flared up, and she wanted me to apologize to him immediately. I struggled to hold on to my flimsy umbrella and calmly replied, "I'm still at the hotel." As my words fell, a thunderclap split the dark sky, followed by a booming sound. Emma's voice was tense, "It's pouring outside. Didn't they bring you back?" Then She was cut off when Ethan suddenly started crying. Is Ray angry? It's all my fault. Maybe I should have left back then. Emma immediately spoke softly to comfort him. Then, in anger, she turned to me and said, "This is your own mistake. What are you feeling wronged about? It's only been a minute. If you had been more magnanimous, I wouldn't have left you." The string in my heart snapped suddenly, and I interrupted her with a smirk. "Let's get a divorce. I won't apologize to Ethan. The one in the wrong has never been me, but you all. Since they can't let go of each other. Then why is Emma provoking me?" It was clearly her who confessed to me first, saying she wanted to be with me for a lifetime, and that's why I firmly chose her. 8 years, does that mean their feelings and youth are precious, while mine are worthless? After hanging up, I quickly hailed a taxi. Sitting in the car, Emma's text came through again. "Ray, if you make a mistake, you have to own up to it. You never deserved me. After 8 years, can you still find a girlfriend? Is there anyone willing to have children with you like I did?" I stared blankly at the message. I thought after experiencing all this today, nothing could be more upsetting, but I was wrong. I rolled down the window, letting the cold wind hit my face. My heart, which had been numb with pain, gradually became clearer. I told the driver to turn around and head straight to the hospital. When I got home, the layout hadn't changed. It seems that Emma has been by Ethan's side all these days. I opened Ethan's social media. He had posted quite a few new updates. Miss Emma, so high and mighty, cooking for love, drawing envy from many. I saved all the posts one by one, then turned off my phone screen. After quickly packing a few things, I went straight to a hotel. I took a hot bath, and my cold body gradually warmed up. I took a few days off from work, and once my health improves, I'll return to the office. During that time, my mom kept calling to ask if I had made up with Emma. I told her I wouldn't be with Emma anymore. She cried and lamented, which left me feeling distressed, so I simply stopped answering her calls. As soon as I entered the office, everyone looked at me with awkward expressions. My colleague Lily pulled me to my desk, and that's when I noticed the headlines on various websites had exploded. She held my hand tightly, surprised and envious. "I never expected your wife to be so wealthy. I always thought Ethan was her lover, but it turns out it was you, Ray." I awkwardly smiled and quickly scanned the content of the posts. Photos from the wedding were posted online by someone with an agenda. They wrote a dramatic piece about a wealthy family's feud. Due to Emma's bizarre actions at the wedding, even her family's business faced some repercussions. If it were in the past, I would have eagerly wanted to help Emma resolve the scandal, but now that I've decided to divorce, I couldn't care less. It was time to get off work. Emma unexpectedly waited at the company entrance. I turned around to avoid her. But she quickly caught up and forcefully pushed me into the car. "Still angry? Can't you tell which is more important, the wedding or a life? You're not that young anymore, throwing a tantrum about divorce and running away from home. How childish are you? All right, didn't you always want to go to that seafood restaurant in the south of the city? I'm taking you there now." After saying that, Emma took a gift box from the locker and threw it to me. What rolled out from inside was a watch. It looked much more expensive than the one on our wedding day. Emma looked at me with a "you should be satisfied" expression and said, "Ethan is not well, so since that ring is already on his hand, just give it to him. This watch is worth much more than that ring, so don't fuss over it." I fiddled with the watch in my hand. The price tag of $99,999 hadn't even been removed. It was probably bought on a whim from the mall. In the past, when I was unhappy, she would personally bake me a cake, patiently listen to music with me for comfort, and spend whole days watching movies, picking out gifts that suited me perfectly. Now, she has become just like her family, putting a price tag on my sincerity and expecting me to accept it gratefully. I shook my head after putting the watch back in the locker. "It's too valuable, it's better to leave it for Ethan. And I haven't caused any trouble. Since you and Ethan can't let go of each other, why don't I give him my spot? We can find time to get divorced." Before the wedding, Emma and I had already obtained our marriage certificate. Now, if we want to separate, we also have to go through the divorce process. I had heard her and Ethan, along with a group of friends, at dinner when someone asked her why she chose an ordinary man like me. She fed Ethan a peeled orange and casually laughed. "I can't say I like him, but Ray has been with me for 8 years, and now I'm pregnant with his child. So, we might as well get married." To her, our marriage was a form of charity and pity towards me. But for me, it was filled with love and sincerity. Now I don't love her anymore, and I don't care about Emma either. I thought that by actively supporting her and Ethan, she would be happy. Unexpectedly, she suddenly got angry, her eyes turning red, and she slammed her right hand on the steering wheel. Ray! Do you think this is funny? You've been trying to please my parents like a dog for years just to marry me, and now you talk about supporting me. How ridiculous. It's just that the wedding didn't happen, we can arrange it again next time, can't we? Besides, who can we blame for this? I already agreed to marry you, but you insisted on making a fuss just because I expressed my feelings to Ethan. She always says that I deliberately got her pregnant. But it was clearly her who said she wanted her parents to accept me and wanted to have a child that belongs to us. It's just that after Ethan came back, she regretted it and blamed everything on me. The horn was blaring sharply as she pressed it. If she had been this angry in the past, I would have cried and apologized to her. But now, I don't want to argue even a single word. I turned to look out at the scenery outside the car. After a long time, seemingly not receiving my humble plea for peace, she turned to me and called out, Ray. I closed my eyes and did not respond. The navigation system was periodically announcing the traffic conditions. Just as we were getting close to our destination, her phone suddenly rang. On the phone, Ethan said his stomach was uncomfortable again and wondered if he was going to die. To be honest, I've gotten tired of hearing him say that even if he hasn't. Since he returned to the country, his stomach has been uncomfortable on every important day. Anyone with their eyes open can see he's pretending, but unfortunately, Emma can't. I spoke first, just drop me off at the intersection ahead. Emma looked at me in shock. You're not angry? You're not insisting on coming with me? I shook my head. In the past, I didn't like her being alone with Ethan, so I suggested I could go with her to take care of him. At that time, she emotionally criticized me for being narrow-minded and petty, and told me to learn to be more composed like Ethan. She pressed her thin lips together, and her phone kept vibrating. The car quickly arrived at the intersection. Just as I was about to get out after grabbing my bag, she grabbed my wrist and looked at me with a complicated expression. I'll go check it out and come back later to take you to eat. Don't worry, don't be angry. Yeah, I'm not angry. I said dismissively, trying to push her away. But she tightened her grip. Ray, why are you different from before? Why don't you? Not jealous anymore. What's there to be jealous about? He treats you like a sister, and it's normal for him to come to you first when he has something, right? Just go. I smiled and pried her hand off to get out of the car. Then I took a taxi back to the hotel, had the hotel buffet, and fell asleep right away. Half asleep and half awake, Emma called me to explain that Ethan couldn't leave right now and that she couldn't take me out to eat, asking me not to wait for her. I simply replied, I've already eaten. She immediately fell silent and then asked me through gritted teeth, do you really have to do this? After I muttered and hung up, I went back to sleep. It wasn't until the next day that I saw her text warning me not to play with fire. Only when I returned to work did I understand what she meant. The projects I was handling had all been transferred to Ethan's name. He became our new team leader, always smiling and assigning me various odd jobs. Emma would come every noon to take him out for lunch. Her gaze was extremely cold when she saw me. The scandal surrounding the online family business was intensifying. She wanted me to attend the press conference held by the family on Friday. To help explain that Ethan was not the third party at all. It was I who had intruded on her relationship with Ethan while he was abroad and forced Emma to marry. She spoke very nicely, saying that we were still a couple privately, but I just needed to bear a little bit of blame. The family turmoil will eventually settle down, and Ethan won't be affected. They also said that all of this was caused by my recklessness at the wedding, and I should bear the consequences. I certainly refused to accept it and immediately put her on my blacklist. My family came to find me again, warning me to follow their arrangements and not to think that having a family heir would allow me to do as I please. I treated them the same way I treated Emma. And I directly resigned from the company. My abilities are not lacking, many companies have tried to recruit me before, but now when I reach out, everyone is evasive. I understand this is the family's doing. They are pressuring me to agree to the press conference. But this time, I don't want to compromise. After another failed job application, a previous client contacted me, saying their newly developed domestic supply chain needs manpower, and the salary wouldn't be worse than the family business, but the job is located out of town, asking if I was interested. After all, I am an only child, and thinking of my parents, I only agreed to think about it. I returned to the hotel. My dad called, saying my mom's heart condition had flared up again. I immediately took a taxi home. As soon as I opened the door, Emma was there too. Mom looks lively and energetic. I stared at her heavily, knowing that I had been betrayed by my biological parents again. At the dinner table, Emma sat next to me, constantly serving me dishes. The three of them appeared to be enjoying themselves, as if they were the true family. Mom kept praising, Emma is truly an exceptional daughter-in-law, not only from a good family but also very caring towards Ray. Dad, clearly the elder, wore a flattering smile and kept serving Emma food. He casually mentioned that at the wedding, it was my stubbornness, and thanked Emma for her understanding. Their obsequious behavior instantly shattered my resolve from these past few days. My eyes turned red. I awkwardly gripped the juice Mom handed me. It's okay, after all, we will be husband and wife. Even if Ray makes mistakes, I will try to be understanding, it's just the press conference. Emma's gaze remained fixed on me, with a hint of disdain and a sense of certainty. I squeezed tightly, causing juice to spill and drip onto the floor. I looked at my parents, unable to hold back any longer. Am I really your biological son? Why have you never firmly stood by my side whenever there's a problem? I've already told you, I won't be with Emma again. Emma furrowed her brows tightly, probably unable to understand why I was being so stubborn after compromising so many times. My mom paused while wiping the table, and the juice-soaked rag fell on my head. The sticky juice mixed with grime dripped down my face. She smiled apologetically at Emma, saying, Emma, it's my fault for not raising Ray properly, getting upset over such a trivial matter and wanting a divorce. Then without hesitation, she slapped me and scolded, Ray, Emma doesn't mind your lack of success, you should be grateful, yet you still want a divorce. Do you have any upbringing at all? Over such a trivial matter at the wedding, how long do you plan to make a fuss? If you won't consider yourself, at least think about the child and your parents. My face was turned to one side, burning with pain. Emma seemed taken aback that my mother would resort to violence. She quickly stood up and reached out to support me. She said with concern, Are you okay? I'll take you to the hospital. Then she turned to my mother and said, Auntie, he is my husband, and I'm carrying his child. If there's a next time, even if you are his mother, I won't hold back. My mother stood frozen in place. I scoffed, looking at her with disdain, Emma, what are you pretending to be a good person for? Isn't this what you wanted to see? Her heart raced under my gaze, and the usually high and mighty Emma showed a look of confusion and helplessness. Ray, you. You just want me to take the blame as the third party, right? Fine, I'll attend the press conference, but don't regret it. With that, I slammed the door heavily behind me. My footsteps quickened. I casually hailed a taxi and left. In the rearview mirror, I saw Emma standing at the entrance of the community for a long time. She kept calling me, but I didn't answer a single one. Then she sent me a text saying that regarding the press conference, we should act according to the situation. She knew I was wronged, and after everything was over, she would make it up to me. See, she knows I'm wrong too. It's just that when it comes to Ethan, I become the one who is inevitably sacrificed. I directly put her on the blacklist. After returning to the hotel, I lay on the bed with my arm over my eyes. My parents' calls kept coming in relentlessly. My mom asked if I wanted to drive her crazy, saying her heart condition was acting up, and if I didn't properly comfort Emma, she might as well let herself die of pain. Then she went on a long tirade about how, after raising me, I was so unfilial. I recalled how my parents' expressions changed after learning about Emma's background. I still couldn't understand why children love their parents from birth, yet some parents can be indifferent to their own children. I replied to her, your body is your own, if you really want to die from pain, I won't stop you. Then I stopped replying to my mom's messages. I called the client, expressing my willingness to work out of town. The press conference is scheduled for Monday. It's also the day of the family business's new product launch. Business people prioritize profit, even at times like this, they don't forget to maximize traffic benefits. I appeared at the venue entrance in a gray suit. Reporters from various media outlets invited by the family business swarmed in. Emma and Ethan are standing not far away. Seeing me struggling to move, Emma immediately came over. I wanted to push her away, but she tightened her grip on my arm. There are so many people, be careful not to bump into the child. I was blinded by the flashes and decided to stop struggling. The reporters inside the venue were clearly much more disciplined. Ethan gave me a smug smile. I shrugged my lips in indifference. I hope you can still smile later. Mr. Ray, may I ask, when Ethan just went abroad, you couldn't wait to drug Ms. Emma so she could conceive your child? What were you thinking at that time? Where did you learn this trick? Two reporters stood up first, their words sharp. Emma beside me looked increasingly cold and snapped, "Who told you to ask these questions?" I glanced at her, thinking only 4 words, hypocritical pretense. As the head of a family, she shouldn't be unaware of what I would face by attending this press conference, right? I ignored her bewildered and regretful gaze. Turning to the 2 reporters, I said, "Since you are friends of Ethan, I can fully understand the qualities you have displayed." The 2 exchanged guilty glances and muttered, "Stop talking nonsense." But under my unwavering gaze, they ultimately said nothing further. After all, if they really wanted to dig, their identities couldn't possibly remain hidden. Not to mention the numerous cameras set up here today. As I watched Emma stay by my side, Ethan swayed a bit. Emma nervously stood up and walked over to him, wrapping her arm around him. "Are you okay? Is your heart acting up again?" Once she left, I was the only one left on stage. Noticing my gaze, she belatedly released Ethan, but he grabbed her arm. "Emma, I feel so tight in my chest." Emma looked conflicted, but ultimately chose to stay by his side. I calmly withdrew my gaze. The remaining questions were still unpleasant, with various terms like third parties, interference, materialism, and opportunism flowing endlessly. Once most of the questions were asked, I stood up, raised the microphone, smiled, opened my briefcase, and waved hundreds of photos towards the crowd, stating, "As for who the third party is, I believe you all can judge for yourselves." A few photos landed near Ethan, and with just one glance, his facade instantly shattered. In the photos, Ethan is out at nightclubs abroad with various women. All that studying abroad and long-distance relationship talk is just a lie. The reason he went abroad was to elope with his first love. He wanted excitement, disliked arranged marriages, so he abandoned Emma. Later, feeling betrayed and regretful, he returned to find Emma, completely ruining my life. Why should I accept that? And Emma knows all of this. Even these photos were found on Emma's computer. But she doesn't care because, in her heart, Ethan is above everything. She would even cover up all the truths for him, dragging me out to bear the blame. "Ray, you." Everyone's pointing and gossiping about them. Just like on the day of the wedding. Ethan trembles all over, nestled in Emma's arms. Emma looks at me in disbelief. I enlarge a chat screenshot on the screen behind me. It shows Ethan messaging me the day before the wedding. He wanted me to guess whether Emma would choose him or me tomorrow. At that time, I still didn't understand what he meant. Until Emma unhesitatingly abandoned me. Sliding back, it's what I saved. Every time Emma looked for Ethan, he posted photos of the 2 of them alone on social media. There are angles from every side, extremely ambiguous. I walked over again and slammed a stomach examination report in Ethan's face. "Even your stomach illness is fake, Ethan, your acting skills are pretty good." He trembled and shook his head. "Ray, I don't know what you're talking about. I know you don't like me, but how can you fabricate these to slander me? What a drama queen." I couldn't be bothered to argue, so I dropped a line, "Whether it's true or false, someone will dig it up." After all, the reporters from these major platforms are not to be underestimated. He slumped and leaned towards Emma. Surprisingly, Emma didn't support him this time. Instead, she hurried over to my side, committing adultery and shielding the third party, turning black and white upside down. This time, her reputation was completely ruined. The product launch event was also declared a total failure. The family business is bound to suffer a significant blow. I thought she was going to settle scores with me. Unexpectedly, she was tightly clutching 2 photos in her hands. In the photo, she is wearing pajamas and holding Ethan in her arms. There's another picture with a hotel room background, where she and Ethan are kissing with their eyes closed. Her thin lips trembled as she grabbed my arm. "Ray, how come you have these photos that aren't as you saw them?" I scoffed and brushed her hand away. "What do you mean? Was someone forcing you to kiss her?" I always thought she could see Ethan's social media. It seemed she had no idea at all. No wonder she could confidently tell me it was just a small matter at the wedding. The scene was in complete chaos. I nodded in satisfaction, then looked at Emma with a cruel smile, deliberately raising my voice to draw everyone's attention to me. "As for me, I put the surveillance video on the big screen. I have never had any intimate relations with Miss Emma, and her child is not mine. To put it simply, I am her stand-in." Emma stood frozen, staring blankly at the big screen, unable to react. The reporters present were all holding a few photos that I had just thrown down. At that moment, they were continuously taking pictures of the surveillance video on the screen. The focus of the interviews instantly shifted to Emma and Ethan. And I gracefully made my exit, pushing through the crowd. As I walked out the door, I could still hear Ethan's helpless cries. Emma was surrounded by the crowd, unable to break free to find me, screaming my name in anguish. She asked me why I treated her this way. I had just called a taxi and was ready to leave. Emma's parents also rushed over, angrily asking me what I had done. I smiled brightly and said, just a small token of appreciation from me. The press conference had caused quite a stir. My parents kept calling, asking if I had lost my mind, and wanted me to cooperate with the family's emergency PR. I thought they were just talking nonsense. I realized that all these years, as an only child, I had given up too many opportunities to stay by their side. I always believed that there are no parents who aren't good, thinking they loved me deep down. But only now do I see clearly that there are indeed parents in this world who don't love their children. They raised me, yet never gave me the selfless love and care that parents should provide. So from now on, I only need to fulfill my financial obligations and then live freely, exploring the world. This PR crisis is quite significant. The family business's stocks have been hitting the lower limit for several days in a row. I can't say I'm happy or unhappy, I just feel a sense of relief. The date to go abroad is set for half a month later. I enrolled in an English-speaking class for myself. I thought that under these circumstances, Emma wouldn't have time to come find me. But just a week later, when I came out of the tutoring class, I saw Emma waiting at the door. She looked quite a bit thinner, and she was wearing the blue scarf I knitted for her last birthday around her neck. In previous years, I would save up most of my salary for half a year to buy her bags and jewelry. But later, I realized that the gifts I considered valuable were the cheapest items in her closet. So last year, I saved 3 months' salary and spent nearly 3 months learning how to knit a scarf. I thought this would make her feel my intentions more. But when I gave it to her, she merely glanced at it and put it in the farthest corner of her closet. I wanted her to try it on, but she frowned at my almost injured hand and said, "You care so much, did you really knit it yourself? Ray, you wouldn't do something so boring, would you?" I instantly pulled my hand back into my sleeve and lowered my head, saying, "Of course not." She noticed me staring at the scarf and deliberately pulled it up, revealing the butterfly embroidery with her name on it. "Ray, does it look good? I thought you had thrown it away long ago." I responded indifferently and turned to walk towards the hotel where I was staying. She followed me into the narrow hotel and hesitated, saying, "How can you stay here? If you don't have money, I can." I interrupted her, "Have you forgotten? I caused you to lose your child, ruined the launch of your family business's new product, destroyed you, and Ethan. Ray, I've thought it through. It was my oversight before, this isn't your fault. As long as you come back with me to apologize to my parents, I promise, my husband will only be you, and we will have children again." I was almost laughing in anger. How could she still think I wanted to be her husband? "I think you've missed the point. The current issue is that I don't want you anymore. There's no way I'm going back to apologize to you." She gritted her teeth, her eyes reddening as she tried to come over to hug me, but my cold gaze stopped her. "Ray, you never used to say such hurtful things to me. You're really angry with me, aren't you? I can explain." As she spoke, she pulled out a stack of photos from her pocket. I ignored her and continued to boil water for the kettle. She followed closely behind me. "This kissing photo is from when Ethan lost a dare. There were too many people at the time, we couldn't possibly ignore the rules. This one is from the hotel that day when the power suddenly went out. He got scared and jumped onto me, which is why we ended up hugging. And this one. Until the water in the kettle went from boiling hot to ice cold." She still had more than half of the photos left in her hand. As she talked, her voice grew softer, and it even started to become hoarse. I looked up at her. "Do you want to keep going?" She clenched the photos tightly, closed her eyes in pain, and said, "The marriage between our families was actually my regret. I fell for you, so when he confessed to me, I turned him down. Because of this, he left the country in anger and faced all that. Ray, we owed him before, but I promise I won't let you suffer even a little bit in the future. You'll understand, right?" Her words really surprised me. The first time I met Emma was during a club event in college. My parents practiced frugality. So, in my freshman year, they cut off my allowance completely. Even when I squeezed every bit of time to work, I often still couldn't fill my stomach, let alone afford clothes that cost hundreds. Just when I was at my wit's end, she came up to me with clothes and said not to let my situation affect the entire club. That's when I started to notice her, but she was always with Ethan, so I chose to hide my feelings. I didn't expect that she had also developed feelings for me back then. A different feeling surged in my heart immediately. I felt utterly disgusted. I smirked at her and said, "Did you think I would be touched by what you just said? Unfortunately, I only feel disgust. This is all your own choice. You could have made amends in any way, but you chose to trample on me instead. And we have no relationship left. I won't forgive you again." I pulled the divorce certificate out of my bag. She stared at me in disbelief, her eyes wide open. 3 days after the press conference, Emma's parents came to find me, accusing me of being a ruthless and malicious man. Then they used their influence to end my marriage with her. She probably realized this too, leaning dejectedly against the doorframe. "So, you won't be coming back, right?" "No." On the day I left, I told no one. But just as I was about to board, I saw Ethan rushing towards me. He was shouting die. He had a glinting dagger in his hand. He accused me of stealing Emma from him. He also questioned why, after breaking me and Emma apart, she still wouldn't accept him. I couldn't dodge in time. At the critical moment, a familiar figure stood in front of me. The dagger plunged into Emma's lower abdomen, and blood instantly stained her white dress. Ethan was restrained by airport security, and someone in the crowd called the police. I watched her fall in front of me, and all that was left in my heart was calm. The boarding announcement sounded. I held my ticket in one hand, while the other wrist was tightly gripped. With a pale face, she pleaded, "Ray, I really know I was wrong. Please stay, okay?" She pulled at the wound too hard, causing the blood to flow even faster. Even though I no longer have feelings for her, I still don't want to bear the responsibility for a life. So I took the scarf I had woven by hand from around her neck, pressed it against her wound, and calmly dialed for an ambulance. Then, I pried her fingers apart one by one and said, "Emma, you're really annoying me like this." After saying that, I handed her over to the airport staff and left without looking back. In the second year of working away from home, I still sent money to my parents every month. They no longer scolded me for being heartless, leaving my elderly parents alone to go work far away. Instead, they often asked with a mix of hope and pleading if I would come home for the new year this year. The family business went bankrupt. It said that it was because Ethan had an affair. He not only publicly spread scandals about the family business online but also sold the core secrets of the business to their competitor. In the end, he was dragged down from the family business building by a distraught Emma, and they both fell to their deaths. As I admired the magnificent scenery of Huangshan with my colleagues, I listened to the current boss chattering on about these old stories. My heart is completely calm. As the new year approaches at home, I replied to my parents, "I won't be back." Then my colleague next to me pulled me to take a photo. In front of the camera, I showed a long-lost radiant smile. I know that my new life has just begun.